This example begins with a stable downtrend, then recently a minor upswing has been followed by a gap up. Choosing a spiral based on that reversal candle strikes a good balance for coverage to the right and is an appropriate moderate size to capture volatile but usually flatter movement that follows a gap up. And this short-term context captured the area where there was a breakout for a bullish continuation, rather than a downward reversal, which was less likely given the sustained bullish volume and weakness in closing under the gap-up candle's low. Pointing the spiral down wouldn't have been much help since it only covered the area under the gap. But if you wanted to use a spiral pointing down, you could extend the end point straight up to the height of the previous swing high. This produced similar proportions in terms of coverage to the right side and slightly above the gap up candle. Interestingly, due to the extraordinarily steep uptrend, the outer portions of the spiral were able to contact the approximate peak, which can be possible but is less common. Changing back to a spiral pointing upwards can produce another variation where pointing to the left and up towards the same previous swing high referenced earlier can produce a situation where the spiral arcs wider and to the right. This would have been a readily available option shortly after the gap up, highlighted the potential of stronger bullish movement. The bearish reversal area referenced from October was quite flat. Normally it's best to choose the highest high. Choosing some of the lower bumps in the area could still produce decent results, except the spiral would be smaller given the shorter distance to the end point. Then there's always the option of flipping the spiral to face down and right, so you can use the same approximate reversal area, but get more coverage to the right side and facing up. It was also good to see the preferable feature of the spiral intersecting with the area where the previous downward reversal began. The reason why the highest price in the flatter bearish reversal area was not initially chosen was because it produced a shallower angle. It also extended the spiral size and made a wider arc, and that could raise concerns of going too far into the future and losing reliability with too much coverage to the right side and up. So as usual, generally avoid shallower angles going more horizontal, along with longer distances between the end and start point, even if the angle isn't so shallow. Sometimes two of the same swing points, in this case two upswing points, can also be used when deciding how to orient a Fibonacci spiral. It creates a sort of trend line. Except in this context, these choices aren't so good since they are at shallower angles. When there's some congestion with lower activity in between a continuation, and there are no sharp swing points of even a small size, it could be possible to use some of the highest and lowest candle prices as though they were swing points. But this is generally avoided since they are not clear and can't really be considered important features on the chart when compared to clear sharp swing points. It produces a relatively large area for coverage to the right side with a relatively small price and time range that are referenced for the start and end point. Also, not only the size, but the spiral often arcs more than 90 degrees from the pointer until price is contacted, if it is even contacted at all. Since a gap candle, in this case the gap up candle, is a significant feature on the chart, it can also be used to position a spiral from its low and high. And here the reason why we didn't point the spiral down except in the very short term context was because it arcs out too wide and doesn't even cover to the right side. And again, even if we choose the option of pointing down to the left, using points that aren't clear swing points in the bullish continuation can produce varying results. So they should generally be avoided, just like basing Fibonacci spirals on candles that aren't the focus on any significant feature, such as this random candle in the middle of the bullish continuation. Also, avoid positioning a spiral based just on a large candle that is not part of any major or clear feature, such as a reversal point or a gap up candle. Yes, such candles might be impactful in the short term, but they're usually not important in the broader context. So start and end points shouldn't be placed on their lows and highs as though they were proper swing points. Also, they usually produce less reliable and useful results. Furthermore, avoid situations like this where there is one proper swing point and one improper swing point. That candle where the end point extends to can't be considered a proper swing point since it doesn't lead to a lasting reversal of the downtrend which later proceeds to go lower. So flipping the spiral won't help much. Same thing down here, not a proper swing point, so don't use it. The place where the starting point is based on this new spiral appears to be similar to the past few situations, except it actually is a proper swing point because there are clear consecutive closes going lower before and then higher after it. In effect, one of the smallest scale swing points and trends possible, comprising of around 3 to 6 candles per phase. The poor results here are not due to the swing points chosen, but rather the direction the spiral is pointing. Pointing down and to the left gets better coverage for the context of the shift to a gradual downtrend. It's also possible to extend the endpoint to the minor downswing, which produces a similar spiral and results. Flipping the spiral is also useful for covering more area, in the broader context where the established uptrend is in a prolonged retracement. However, it's more suitable to use the more recent and relevant area of this upswing. As soon as the shallow downtrend begins to reverse, there are no clear swing points in the developing uptrend yet, but that's okay, we can use the last swing points from the downtrend, though since the uptrend isn't exceedingly strong, getting wide coverage of the spiral to the top right corner is not suitable. Instead, it's better to flip the spiral down and to the right, resulting in a more moderately sized spiral that is more appropriate for this stable uptrend. And soon enough, there's close contact with the spiral as the trend begins to weaken. The trend almost forms a direct 90-degree angle with the pointer, which is a less common but strong sign of how reliable the spiral orientation is. Speaking of angles, we now have a better situation to display how using two of the same types of reversal points, in this case 2 upswing points, can produce a highly valid trend line with a pointer, resulting in a fairly useful Fibonacci spiral which identifies this area of interest where the bullish continuation was likely to encounter some opposition. A trend line that produces a Fibonacci spiral with an appropriate size for the given context can make up for some other shortcomings such as using these less ideal minor swing points, especially the one the end point is on now. It's also possible to use some of the minor downswings since they produce similar spirals. And although going back here puts the end point on a more important reversal high, it produces a spiral that's too large and begins to lose effectiveness over time. Using the candle at the peak here provides good coverage for this downtrend here, both in terms of size and the curvature of the spiral. But when we extend down to the swing point here, we get a similar problem with lost accuracy when the spiral becomes too large. A slight remedy to shrink the spiral is to flip it, though it's still not as good as going back to a situation like this, where swing points are sharper, quicker, and more pronounced.